us asking ourselves whether or not it's possible to be a black white supremacist, you and I know the answer to that. White supremacy doesn't mean necessarily a white person has to be in the driver's seat. White supremacy can benefit non-white people. There were black slave owners, and it's said that some of those folks were the cruelest slave owners in the country. The economic system at the time, in place at the time, was based around slave ownership. And so there are many people that would say that during slavery, that's kind of peak white supremacy. And, again, the idea that there were black slave owners flies in the face of the fact that black people can't be white supremacists. But there are some names that come up, certainly, in our travels, Hughes and myself, especially when we're talking with folks who are more conservative thinking than we are. And a lot of times they use the race of certain political pundits to hide behind and say, well, Candace Owens feels the same way that I feel, and she's black. So this idea cannot be in and of itself racist because this is a black woman who feels the way that I feel, right? And that's a very common excuse. It's a very thin excuse, but a very common excuse. And I'll let you share a bit here, Q, before we get into some of the other names here. But I know that this has been something that has happened, for you as well.
I wish this question was either harder to answer or that the answer was flatly no. Like, that'd be an easier conversation to have. Like, sure. Could there be black white supremacists? Absolutely not. And like, we'd have to get order in the court because everybody in the courtroom lost their mind and just got out of control and slamming the gavel. Order. And we just have to calm everybody down.
I can see it. Yeah.
Ridiculous question. Everybody's upset and you flipping over tables and throwing stuff and pushing babies down and just pandemonium, just chaos. Everybody, like, people would lose it if you asked such a question. I hate that the answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't take us 10 seconds to think about it before we answer.
Yeah.
There are, for the entirety of the system of white supremacy, examples of black people that helped hold it up. Mm-hmm. We recently had a conversation about the Willie Lynch letter. And there's logic and sinister like thought and planning in that letter that led to not only there being, black white supremacists, but for parts of history, black people playing a pivotal role.
Sure.
In making sure that system endured and making sure that we obeyed and making sure that we were subservient, making sure that we stayed in bondage.
Yeah.
So yeah, the answer has always been yes.
Yeah.
I just wish we would have evolved out of a position where it could even still be true. But unfortunately, there will always be room for and money for and opportunity for black faces that are willing to parrot the beliefs and the ideals of white supremacy.
Yeah. And I think that's key, because when you have one group at the top and another group at the bottom in a society, recruiting a couple of folks from the bottom to the middle that's a very powerful position to have a human being, because in their minds, well, I live in a society where there is very much a binary. I'm either the haves or I'm the have-nots. But I, the individual, occupy a very unique space in this binary society where I'm not the zero. I'm not the one, but I'm not the zero. I'm somewhere in between. And as long as I help maintain this binary, then I will occupy a place of privilege, of prestige. In the past, we would refer to this as like, those of us that come from black culture, we refer to this as Uncle Tom. Maybe there's, and depending on the context, you could refer to this as like the house Negro or the head house Negro, which is again someone who occupies that little gap in between the binary. So let me make this live a little bit more. So I mentioned Uncle Tom. Another person who kind of feels like a black white supremacist that is from popular culture is Clayton Bigsby. Dave Chappelle famously played a character named Clayton Bigsby, a black white supremacist who was blind, and so he didn't know that he was black. Right? He just thought he was white and hated black folks. But the comedy, of course, is that he himself was black. There's a guy named Uncle Ruckus for those who've seen the anime cartoon, The Boondocks. Shout out to Yamara Taylor, my big sister, who is the staff writer for that show when that was being produced. And Steven is another person. Steven, for those who've seen Django Unchained, Steven really is the character that best embodies the idea of the head house Negro, right? And so all of these names will come up from time to time. But there are people in modern times that very much function in the same way that these other characters have functioned, right? These characters are dangerous, and they give a black shield to white supremacy. And don't be fooled, they're often very intelligent, very charismatic. They are propped up, exalted, and it's often suggested that these folks should be the model for all black people. And when you do the math and you think all black people should behave like this person, the reason that all black people don't is because are all black people just stupid, misinformed, uneducated, or is this example not true to their nature, to their predicament, to their circumstances, to their plight? You know what I mean? And I think that conundrum is rarely faced by people that try to hide behind that black shield of the white supremacy. But it's certainly a question worth asking. Now, I'm going to share a couple of names here that we know about. Candace Owens, as I mentioned, she's a person that is on record saying that police brutality is a myth. Once upon a time, she praised Hitler for his nationalism. Weird. She made a George Floyd documentary released on his birthday. Like, it's just an extra cruel thing to do. And the documentary about George Floyd was to suggest that somehow he was the reason that he died, that he had a knee on his, like it was his own fault or otherwise, that he did not deserve to live because of other things in his life as he was getting himself together or whatever this story is. A black woman made that documentary, right? Don't forget, she's also the person that wore the White Lives Matter shirt, which is deeply insulting to the majority of black people. Next to Kanye West in Paris for Fashion Week. Another person, Justice Clarence Thomas. He's a black conservative that wants black people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Let's forget for a second that that's impossible to do. But, it's a common saying. He's one of those folks, right? Nothing wrong with him so far. But he's closest to the character Steven from Django. He is the embodiment of skin folk and kin folk. So we don't count on him to support a black agenda. Indeed, the opposite. And his wife, who is white, by the way, not that that matters, but she is, she participated in and protected those involved with January 6th, right? Okay, let's go to Herschel Walker. He was a name that was in the headlines a few years ago, and then, of course, back when he played in the NFL. He is the embodiment of everything the right supposedly despises about black men in America, but celebrity culture gave him a head start because of his name, and as a result, he got to at least try to play the political game. And then a big name that we know around here, Kanye West, or Ye. Remember, he's the one that said George Bush doesn't care about black people. So once upon a time, he was that Kanye West. But lately, since then, he's worn a Confederate flag, said slavery was a choice, said Harriet Tubman never freed the slaves. Obviously, the MAGA hat, the White Lives Matter shirt, fraternizing with known white supremacists, then became a full-blown Nazi, praising Hitler, making music about Hitler. So the answer is yes, it is possible for black people to be white supremacists.